I'm sure we have all been challenged in trying to speak with somebody from the opposite sex, right? I certainly know I have. And it's exactly those kinds of challenges that has intrigued me to research this further, really understand what is it about communicating with a male, for example, or communicating with a female. There are definitely differences. I like to say we all talk, right? But do we really communicate? Communicate is like that big umbrella over talking. Talking is just one subset of communication. There are 5 key nuances in gender communication. And if we understand what those differences are, we can really go a long way in enhancing our communication with the opposite sex, whether it's at work, in our personal relationships, with our friends, and with our children. Now, how do we get at that? Well, quite frankly, the brain is actually wired differently to some degree. Now, there are lots of research findings about that, and yet there are mixed results in some cases. But suffice it to say, I think that there are enough basics that we can use that to better understand and therefore reduce misunderstand. So, what are the 5 key areas? Number 1, emotional expression. Number 2, communication styles. Number 3, our use of language. And number 4, listening styles. And number 5, body language. So let's go back to the first one, emotional expression. So females tend to, not everybody, have an inclination to prioritize empathy and emotional connection. They like to connect with one another before they get into the hard stuff. They seek to share and understand feelings, whereas males tend to focus on problem solving and offer solutions during conversations. And that's one thing I learned early in my career, particularly as I was training individuals in large corporations. Know these styles, or at least appreciate what you encounter in dealing with certain people. And so for males, it's quite honestly, be upfront and say, okay, I'm happy to listen to what you have to say, but I do want to know, are you seeking to hear a solution that could work, or are you simply seeking to vent? Very important. And females, likewise. I just need you to listen to me. I need to get this out of my head. I'm not really looking for a solution right now. So please don't go there, because I have heard that time and time again in male and female relationships that I just wanted to vent and here he was giving me a solution. Or for the males, like, God, you kept going on and on when it was so clear to me that here's a solution. Well, that is a difference. Now, there are additional techniques, but we're not going to go into that right now. And then communication styles. What we know in terms of cultural differences, and male-female dynamics are certainly a cultural difference as well, not as our typical race, ethnicity, region, culture, et cetera, like that. But we do know that there is what's called high context versus low context. This is where males and females differ in terms of that context ability. Now, there's much more to that, so I'm not going to get into all of that now, but females do have a more indirect style. They want to try to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. And they talk more in stories. It's important for females to give the context, the background, before getting to the point. And quite frankly, that can drive males crazy. They want to go get to the bottom line. What's the deal? What's the problem to be resolved? And so males tend to be more direct. They state in thoughts and opinions, and not so much in feelings and emotions. They like to focus on facts and figures. So just think about it. When you're at a social gathering, what happens? Very naturally, the females gravitate together and the males gravitate together. What are each of the groups talking about? For males, it tends to be, did you see that game last night? And what about that RBI? Or what about that touchdown? And they're talking about numbers and figures and et cetera. Whereas if you go listen to the females, they're often talking about how are the kids doing? What's happening with your children or your family? What about that friendship? And so they tend to talk more about relationships. Females, relationships. Males, facts and figures. That goes a long way in looking at other aspects of how males and females communicate, whether it's in conflict informally or formally, like in mediation, for example. very important that we be aware of these things as we're fulfilling our different roles in life. And then our use of language. Females tend to be a little bit more descriptive and detailed with qualifiers and sometimes hedging language. It's more, well, I think that this might be the way to go. Rather, males will be much more concise, assertive, and reflecting certainty. This is what we're going to do, and that's it. Big difference. And so females may be more poised to ask questions or phrase things in a way that are entertaining someone else's perspective, whereas males come at it much more decisive and more likely to be opinion rather than perspective. Listening styles. Females tend to be a little bit more active, offering verbal affirmations, which is both a good thing and not so much of a good thing. Sometimes those little verbal affirmations can actually interrupt the flow of communication, disrupt the other person's brain in terms of how they're saying what they mean to say. Whereas men tend to listen more silently. And the downside of that is it can send an implicit message that the males are not as engaged, actually coming across as disengaged, not really caring about the emotion or the pain that somebody may be feeling, particularly when we're talking about disputes. And then body language. Females just tend to be more expressive, particularly in the facial expressions, including gestures, to convey emotions in support of what they're trying to say verbally. Whereas men tend to be a little bit more reliant on posture, leaning forward, less on facial expressions, rather of a stoic or nondescript facial expression. Again, something that can come across as reserved. So where do I go with this? If we understand just these basics in how we show up, we can begin to understand where some natural misunderstandings happen. And so I encourage you, seek out, play with this a little bit. Talk to your friends and significant others of the opposite gender and see where you line up on these 5 key areas of nuances in gender communication. I'm Dr. Debra Dupree, the Mindset Doc. There's so much to learn about these differences and yet similarities. Don't let it get in the way of a good relationship. It's simply adjusting your style and learning to do things a little differently.